We'll record on this computer. Back in the day when we were doing these at the very beginning, and Zoom and Facebook sometimes didn't talk to each other. So there was just this like moment of terror right before an event would start where it's like, is it going to connect? But they kind of have that all figured out now. So it's been pretty smooth sailing for a little while. So it's so fun to still be doing these things. So hello, Thea. Hello, Leah. How are you both tonight?
Good. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you for being here.
Yes, just so happy.
Yay. So I was asking Thea in the green room, she's calling in from South Florida, so the southern part of Florida. Leah, where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling in from Santa Barbara, California. We're having a bit of a heat wave today. So it's like, yeah, it's really intense, but I went to the beach today. It was lovely. So
beautiful. Yeah, we were talking about that too. It's like it was 90 here in San Diego, which is unseasonable for April. So it's a little crazy there. Just real quick, so while Facebook's letting everybody know that we're here, we're live. Seems like we have both the coasts covered, and hopefully some people will be joining us from in between those coasts. Warwick's is located, as I just said, we're in San Diego. The store is actually in La Jolla, which is just a little bit north of the downtown proper area. Doing business since 1896, as my little sign says. We celebrated our 125th anniversary last year, so that was pretty fun. So if you're in the San Diego area, for tonight's conversation, Leah and Thea are going to be chatting for about 30-ish minutes, something like that. In the comment section, a couple things are going to happen. I'm going to put Leah's book into that comment section. You can go ahead and click on that. If you're in the San Diego area, we would love for you to stop by the store and pick it up and look at all the other great stuff that we have in the store. But like Thea and I were talking, the independent bookstores are pretty great, and we can actually ship books. So if you're somewhere where you're not in San Diego, we can actually ship this to you. The other thing that I want you to do in that comment section is put your questions in there. They're going to have a great conversation, but always love the audience questions. So don't be shy and pop those into that comment section, and I'll bring that to their conversation after they are done. So with that, I've given Facebook a couple minutes to let people know we're here. So I'm going to introduce these two lovely ladies and then get off the screen. So Leah Thomas is an intersectional environmental activist and eco-communicator based in Southern California. She's passionate about advocating for and exploring the relationship between social justice and environmentalism, and was the first to define the term intersectional environmentalism. She is the founder of @GreenGirlLeah and the Intersectional Environmentalist platform. Her articles on this topic have appeared in Vogue, Elle, The Good Trade, and Youth to the People. And she has been featured in Harper's Bazaar, W Magazine, Domino, Goop, Fashionista, BuzzFeed, and numerous podcasts. She has a BS in environmental science and policy from Chapman University and worked for the National Park Service and Patagonia headquarters before pursuing activism full-time. And like she says, she's up in the Santa Barbara area of California. And she's here today to talk about her new book, The Intersectional Environmentalist. There it is. And joining her is Thea E. Gay. Thea is a passionate student leader helping to pave the way for a new generation of advocacy and change. She is known for turning obstacles into opportunities with creativity and grace through her work in social justice and equity building space. She is currently a senior at the University of Florida, studying to get her bachelor's degree in sociology. At UF, Thea serves as a student advisor for the Office for Accessibility and Gender Equity, and as an intersections scholar. At Intersectional Environmentalist, she works as a programming fellow, assisting in event coordination, content creation, and external communications. She also serves her community as a volunteer organizer for Chainless Change, a local nonprofit focused on recovery, advocacy, and support to those negatively impacted by the criminal legal system. With that, ladies, have a wonderful conversation. See you in about a half hour.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And Thea, I'm so stoked to be here with you. I think the whole Leah and Thea situation makes me really excited. But for the people tuning in who we can't see on Zoom, but I trust that you all are there. Yeah, we're here to talk about Intersectional Environmentalist, the book, and Intersectional Environmentalist, the organization, and Intersectional Environmentalism as a framework. I know that's a lot of syllables, but to kick us off, to kind of ground us in what this book and this whole educational movement is about, I'm going to start with just reading about 2 paragraphs from the introduction, which serve as kind of the thesis for the book. And then we'll get into it with a Q&A from Thea and I. So the argument of this book, essentially, and I'll kind of paraphrase and skip around, is that we really can't save the planet without uplifting the voices of its people, especially those most often unheard. And we should care about the protection of people as much as we care about the protection of our planet. Because to me and many climate justice activists, this fight is exactly the same. And as a society, while we often forget that humans are a part of our global ecosystem, we don't exist separately from nature, and we coexist with it each and every day. And unfortunately, as with other animals, some humans are endangered and facing a multitude of social and environmental injustices that impact their ability to not only survive, but also thrive in liberation and joy. And in my environmental practice, caring for the earth means caring for its people. So to get into it, Thea, well, first, I would love to know a little bit about your journey to working with Intersectional Environmentalists, the organization, and why it kind of stood out to you, like why that intersection of protecting people and the planet is something that you wanted to be a part of.
Yeah, definitely. When I think about intersectional environmentalism, I realize that it embodies so many different parts of my identity. And that's where I realized like this could be my calling. This could really be the space where I thrive in, because I'm the type of person where I am interested in so many different social issues. And I don't want to have to give up, caring or fighting for those issues, because I think there's a lot of emphasis on singling out one thing that you want to do with your life and just focusing on that. But I'm the type of person where I'm very multidimensional, and I want my life and my career and my activism to reflect multidimensionality. So Intersectional Environmentalist was one of the first organizations that I've seen like really step out into this space and say, it's okay for things to be complicated. And it's okay to talk about the different complications that come with social issues and how everybody has different life experiences based on where you are socially located or your identity and where you are in history. And that's okay. That's not something we should shy away from. Just because it's complex doesn't mean we can't talk about it. So I was really happy, to have the chance to work with IE. And, I reached out to Leah, and, it got me to this position, and that was amazing. And I also wanted to point out one amazing thing about Leah is that she really stands for the idea of empower people. There's a lot of people that get into activist spaces and in activist work, and they only focus on their progression. But I really seen Leah and IE focus on broadening their perspectives and bringing people to the table along with them as they build their platform. And that's something that's so special to me, because there's not a lot of people out there like that. And it inspires me to want to do the same as I build my own platform and go through my own career and my own journey.
I didn't know that, some waterworks might happen with that answer, but thank you so much. That makes me really happy. And I think, when I was writing this book and building the organization Intersectional Environmentalists, I really wanted it to be a collective, because we can't do environmental work alone. And it's so much better when we just, meet people where they're at and coalition build and all of that. So that really flows throughout the book and the organization. And to take it all the way back, I should probably define what intersectional environmentalism means to me. And then Thea, I'll let you tell me and everyone what it means to you. So to me, it kind of starts with intersectional theory. Like, what does that mean exactly? And intersectional theory kind of started in the legal sense, because Kimberly Crenshaw, who created the terminology, was seeing several court cases where there were loopholes, where people had kind of overlapping identities that led to specific legal outcomes. So for example, there was a GM, and the GM fired all of the Black women. and they tried to sue because, they fired all the Black women and it seems like a case of discrimination. However, the case was dismissed because the judge said, well, there's still Black men who are working here and there's still white women who are working here. So it's not a civil rights issue and it can't be a gender-based issue. And the argument on the origins of intersectional theory in the legal framework was, well, you sometimes need to consider those compounding factors. It's a combination of the two. It's not just these things existing separately. And there's a real danger in not considering those overlapping identities and how they could lead to different legal outcomes. So for me, when I thought about environmentalism, it was also similar. I think there can be a lot of oversights when people consider something, oh, this is an environmental issue, this is a conservation issue, this is a racial justice issue. We don't mesh those things because oftentimes there's compounding factors that lead to where environmental injustices happen. So things like income are a really large determinant of whether or not someone will experience environmental injustices in their neighborhoods. And so is race. And that goes back to structural racism and the placement of cities, etc. So these factors compound, and it's just really important to consider so we can have the most comprehensive solutions to environmental policies. And let me get off of my, soapbox. So Thea, to you, and I think something that really excites me about your work is you're also really passionate about like veganism and food justice and those sorts of things, which are also really important. But yeah, what does intersectional environmentalism kind of mean to you and those passion areas that you focus on?
Yeah, I definitely want to touch on the veganism aspect because I think it comes all the way down to language and how we understand things and also how we interpret them. And that's a really big thing I learned in sociology. And when I first got into veganism, for me, it had a variety of factors. Like, I really care about the climate and I want to do whatever I can to help like reduce my carbon footprint. And then for me, also veganism stemmed from my own family history of having to deal with a lot of diseases that were preventable. And, hearing about my mom talk about her siblings and her family members who get cancer and diabetes, it just made me realize that if there's anything I could do to maybe change my diet or change my lifestyle that could possibly prevent that, or at least mitigate it in the future, like I would be down to doing that, especially since the Black community has been historically targeted by big corporations and especially food corporations. And I just think that like, because I have the power and the privilege to change my diet, I should also use the resources that I have to apply that to my lifestyle and also try to make it more accessible to other Black and Brown communities. And then I think the third aspect of it is just, I also really love animals, but I don't think environmentalism should just stop at animals. I think it also has to extend to, I love animals, I love the environment, and I love the people a part of this society and this environment. And one of the ways that I view veganism and intersectional environmentalism is by viewing it through the lens of liberation, like understanding that these frameworks and these ideologies are not just like lifestyle choices or add-ons that you can just do for fun. It's necessary, and we need to have more conversations talking about reducing our meat consumption, or we need to have more conversations about how can we keep digging. Like, that's the wonderful thing about environmentalism, is that it never stops. There are so many different intersections that you can explore. There are so many different, perspectives, stories, and narratives that are out there to be heard. It's never one and done, like, oh, I was able to look at these two things and how they coincide together. It's like, it's a never ending thing. And I think that's the beauty of it, because we really need to understand things as fluid and, that they're on a spectrum. It's not just like, okay, we defined it one time and now we're good. I think intersectional environmentalism really pushes us to always question, to wonder, to want more, to want better, and to ultimately build a more equitable, sustainable, and regenerative society.
So many snaps to that, so many snaps to that. And I think why I kind of started talking about intersectional environmentalism is really because I went to school at a predominantly white institution, and there were no professors who looked like me. And in my textbooks, you know, environmental justice or considering those intersections was kind of considered as an elective. It's not something that you had to learn about. While you had to learn about conservation history, conservation heroes, the history of the Earth Day movement, it's not fair that the stories that contain environmentalism and environmental action from people of color is not mandatory. So we're seeing a lot of students that have similar curriculums that are graduating, not understanding that people of color are also a part of environmental history, and that caring about people is optional. And that's a really serious flaw, in my opinion. So I think it should be mandatory to learn about what's going on in local communities, because I remember just studying even things like tree cover, and the presence of trees is so closely linked to median income and race. And like you said earlier, that's also, you know, it's not just, you know, I love the trees, but it's an environmental issue, but it's also a human health issue that's directly correlated to that, because the lack of tree cover means lack of shade, which means an increased rate of heat stroke in these areas. And also those lack of beautiful trees, there's not enough trees to sequester and bring in that carbon, which isn't helping with air pollution, et cetera. So it's all connected. And I think that connection, it's not meant to make us feel overwhelmed, but to me, it actually feels really empowering, because I think, oh, as an environmentalist, I can also work with racial justice advocates, because there are a couple of things that we're tackling at the same time. And imagine the people power if we united when we can. Okay, people that are in economics. Okay, there's so many tie-ins with economics and the environment and social injustice. Why don't we see how we can unite together and create even more comprehensive solutions instead of kind of siloing everything? But one thing that I want to talk about is that part of intersectional environmentalism, it's not just about trauma. So environmental injustice and who it's happening to, and advocating that it doesn't continue to happen to the most marginalized people, is a huge part of environmental justice and intersectional environmentalism. But the other part that I adore even more, not being biased, is the joy, and the joy that representation can bring if we have more inclusive environmental storytelling. Because I remember when my mom gave me a doll of a Black doctor, and I was young, and I said, you know, I want to be a doctor. And she constantly exposed me to these different careers in STEM, and that's what led me to start studying environmental science. Imagine if other little Black girls and boys got these stories of environmentalists and their contributions to environmental history. That could inspire a whole new generation of environmentalists, a whole new generation of solutions to the climate crisis, etc. And without having that representation in curriculums, we're really losing that. So part of the work that we do is also infusing environmental history and storytelling with some of those unsung heroes that are Black and brown and queer folks, etc., that also have their stories told. And lastly, this is so important, even in academic spaces, because it makes no sense that we're not teaching it. Like Indigenous peoples worldwide protect over 80% of the world's global biodiversity by doing their own cultural practices. So they already have the solutions, and many people of color have the solutions. They might not call it sustainability or environmentalism, but they know how to farm better, and we know how to do these things better. So we really should be including them in environmental conversations. But anywho, Thea, do you have any kind of thoughts on that joy component? Because I feel like radical imagination and joy is slowly becoming a part of IE's work in a major way. And I think that's what keeps me going, finding some optimism in the future.
Oh my gosh, yes. Like I love thinking about the joy aspect, and also reflecting on like my own like history and like my ancestral history, and just thinking about how many stories and narratives and things that were hidden away from me just as a child and growing up, how I'm even still learning about so many amazing, Black people who have been fighting throughout history. I remember I was taking an African American class, and it was the first time I ever learned that like Haiti actually held a revolt against France and was able to like successfully like liberate themselves from France for a while. And I think that's so beautiful. Like, and it inspired so many people across the African diaspora and enslaved people because they saw that representation. They saw that it is possible to fight against these oppressive systems. It is possible to fight against exploitation and colonialism. Like, we can do this and we can do this together. And, you know, I feel sad that I didn't learn about that until college, but it also reminds me that Black joy and resiliency has been in our history. It's been in my blood, and it has also been passed down to me. So I look at it as something where, you know, it's an honor to stand here today on this Zoom and to continue to have these conversations because it just means I'm perpetuating that same legacy. And the more I learn and the more I grow, I'm able to become a better intersectional environmentalist and continue to advocate because I think joy is definitely something they don't want us to have, which is why they don't feature our histories because they know if we really knew how it went down and if we knew like what our ancestors were doing and how amazing they were, it would really like impact the way we view our society. So I think that's something that I'm trying to do in the process of decolonization and just reminding myself that like I have a right to be here and the joy and resiliency is passed down to me. And that's definitely something that I want to use my platform to champion.
So many snaps to that. Yeah, I feel like intersectional environmentalism, it just makes me feel so comfortable, I guess, because and empowered because I don't have to separate my identity from my environmental practice, nor does anyone. And that's quite silly to even do that. And one example is I spoke at a church. I'm not religious, but I studied comparative world religions as my like minor and cluster. I'm just fascinated by spirituality, which is an aspect of intersectional environmentalism. And I loved going into that space and hearing people say, you know, I care about climate justice because I think the earth is one of God's creations. And I believe that the people and the animals are his creations. Therefore, so I was like, you know, whatever way, whatever got you there, you're there. So let me help guide you. And I want to be like that for everyone. I don't want the environmental space to be exclusive. I would love for people of color to understand that their history is also a part of environmental history. And it's not something that's just reserved for a very particular group of people, which is often not working class people, not people of color, not queer people, etc. So yeah, representation is so important. And I think that's kind of what we're fighting for at Intersectional Environmentalist and in this book. I'm not fighting. I think sometimes people say, what is this term? What does it mean? We have environmental justice, we have climate justice, but I think intersectional environmentalism is kind of a lens to look at environmentalism through to reach the goal of environmental justice or environmental liberation. So there's some subtle differences there. But Thea, so what are some kind of conversations in the intersectional environmentalist space you think should be talked about a little bit more? I would love to hear some information about your work that you're doing. I just heard about it in your bio, like the Center for Accessibility and Gender or something like that.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, I'm a student advisor for the Office of Accessibility and Gender Equity at my university. So for me, when I think about intersectional environmentalism and when I connect it to so many different other social factors like gender, it just like reminds me, as you said, to use that lens when I go into that space. So when I'm thinking about gender, is my approach intersectional? Who am I including and excluding? And where am I not looking? And I think that's what drives me. Like when I think about everything, I'm like, okay, so I know this facts and I was able to get this information, but is there anything more that I need to uncover? Is there anything I missed? Because we always have to like keep questioning ourselves. I think that's the really big thing in like sociology. It's like having a beginner's mind. Like when you come to a space or when you start learning about something, even if it's something that you have a lot of information on, even if you consider yourself an expert, there's always something to learn. There's always a new person to talk to. And that really pushes me when I think about intersectional environmentalists, especially when I think about like my own identity and I think about like how I, as a Black woman, you know, the way I navigate this space is very differently than other people would. And I'm also a cisgender Black woman, so I also have to acknowledge that other Black women are not going to have the same experience as me. So I don't see the idea of Black women or just anyone or any identity as a monolith. And I think that's really important. And I try to apply that to my work. And also, I really want to continue to educate people on that and push that. Like, don't be afraid to keep questioning. Don't be afraid to, think beyond what you know, because that's okay. And that's awesome. Like, I think learning is awesome. Books are awesome. And growing is awesome. And the only way you can do that is by expanding your mind.
I completely agree. And I love what you said about having a beginner's mind. I
Mhm.
think that's so important. There's so many environmental organizations I speak with, and sometimes people are just so like, well, we've been doing it this way for a really long time. Well, you should radically reimagine every year during your strategic planning. Mission statements are meant to shift because sometimes mission shifts. And just being really open to the journey of learning and accountability, it becomes more fun and there's less, defensiveness there. And honestly, I understand why and mainstream environmentalism is not intersectional currently. Because like I said earlier, people can graduate with an environmental science and policy degree, never having learned about the concept of environmental justice. And not learning about that might make you think this has nothing to do with the work that I'm doing. A lot of environmental organizations, they strictly focus on conservation, which makes sense. And they're allowed to do that if that's their core work. But they do get a lot more support and media attention than grassroots climate justice organizations. So there's a bit of a public awareness issue that we're having. And that's why IE, as an org, we're all about accessibility and awareness. So people can, I don't know, we could scream at the top of our lungs and say, we're here. Here are all the organizations that have been here for a long time. So people can just see us because, we've been in this movement for a really long time. But before we move into Q&A, I'm trying to think about what question I want to ask. So in the future, if you could imagine an intersectional environmentalist future, what would that look like to you? And it's fine if it's very utopia based because we can shoot for the moon and land on a star. So.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is such a good question. And I would love for you to answer it after me. I think the big thing is like society diverging away from trying to understand everything and more towards like radical acceptance. I think there's such a push to always, categorize stuff and like be like, this goes here, that goes there, you are here, you are there, check these boxes, do this goes here. And it's like, I think instead of viewing things like that, we really should understand like things are a lot more fluid, things fluctuate, things change, and things, evolve over time. Like we as people evolve, people are different. That's okay. It's not necessarily a bad thing. We don't need dominant narratives to necessarily organize a society because I really think the society is built on a foundation of like universality or like we come up with this concept and anything that excludes this particular concept is not right and we don't have to deal with it. And like just pushing narratives that don't make any sense and honestly don't do anything for anyone except for a few wealthy people. So I guess like diverging away from that would be the most important because I would love to see less trying to put people into boxes and more like how can we view you as a person for who you are and what you can uniquely contribute to the society, as well as, uplifting you, making sure that you're heard, making sure that you're loved, making sure that no one, no one should be homeless. No one should be not able to like feed themselves. Everyone should have food, shelter, and like and access to a job. Like there's just so many basic human rights that are not like given to everyone. And it's just really disheartening, especially when we have the resources and the money to provide that for people. So definitely pushing away from that and, imagining ourselves as a global collective society and the actions that we do impact everyone instead of seeing ourselves as like, okay, you're over here, I'm over here, I'm only focused on what I have to do. I think it's really important. I just really want to build like a coalition of the whole world where we all, can fully live meaningful lives.
Yes, I love it so much. And yeah, I agree. I think in the future, people having their environmental human rights met. So it's kind of like, and I know that shouldn't even sound radical, like everyone should have clean air to breathe. 71% of African Americans in the US are living in communities that are in violation of federal air quality standards. And even like white Americans, like 40 something percent, like people aren't even breathing clean air every day. I feel like arguably that should be a basic human right that we can guarantee for everyone. In addition to having water to drink, places to be able to relax safely in nature, I feel like those are kind of human needs and human rights. So when I think about the future, I want those things and more, because I think we can have those things hopefully with some strong policy, while I'm still around. But if not, hopefully in the future we'll get that together. In addition to that, yeah, I don't know. So our slogan for IE is "The future is intersectional." And part of that is because I hope that in the future, we don't have to say intersectional environmentalism. We can just say environmentalism, because in the future, hopefully an environmentalist will be a person who automatically cares about the protection of people, the planet, and animals, because we're all kind of coexisting on this earth together. So that's my dream for the future, that it will be intersectional and people will be a bit more compassionate, and will be a bit more accepting and let people show up exactly as they are, being themselves and contributing their full selves to the movements that they care about, the jobs that they work at, the organizations they work at, etc. And I think maybe one day we can get there if we start to just be a little bit kinder to ourselves and other people and the planet. But just in case we have any questions from the audience, yeah. Hey.
Well, hello back. Oh my God, you two are both so inspiring. And it's like, I'm seeing public office running the world from you two. I mean, come on. I mean, well, and us old people need to learn from you, this generation that's coming up, that's going to be in power soon. And you two are very inspirational that way. Leah, question for you. So you started intersectional environmentalist. What made you decide that you wanted to write a book about? What was that? What is your goal, or what do you think, what do you want to have happen with the book?
Yeah, so I've always wanted to write a book so badly. I love writing, and I've been freelance writing kind of since college, just about. Was like steadily writing more op-eds and things like that. And I just really love the power of communications, especially in environmentalism. It's kind of like a puzzle piece. When I was studying environmental science, going home to Missouri, trying to tell my family about these scientific things and realizing this needs to be accessible. And I feel like that's also another flaw in the environmental space. The information isn't easily digestible for people who exist outside of the environmental space. And if we want more people to care, they should be able to easily understand it.
Correct. Yes.
So that's why I went into kind of climate communications. And as I was founding this organization at the exact same time, I actually reached out to a literary agent that I had talked to maybe 3 years prior about another project, and said, I don't know what's going on, but suddenly thousands of people around the world are asking me to tell them about intersectional environmentalism. You were really nice to me. Can we try? So she believed in me and she walked me through the book proposal process. This is during the pandemic. So I was kind of in a research hole every single day trying to bring this book together. And I think I just knew, like, I knew that I wanted to start an org and I wanted to do a book. I wanted to do them at the same time, because there's so many learning lessons that I was learning along the way that I think this book captures. And I think in some ways this is for students, so traditional and non-traditional. So anyone who is starting their environmental journey or wants to take a deeper dive into environmental justice, this is a primer and hopefully just a starting point for people. And I wanted it to be as accessible and kind as possible. And I also wanted it to just be in one place, because we have a lot of resources on IE, but I just wanted it to be in one place. So,
and because I think, and the other thing too, though, with a book, because the information, so that's what's the beauty of your organization is, as things evolve, you can update that through your organization, because I'm sure there's information. So do you give people in the book, is it more of a, is it an overview? Is it, tell me a little bit about the structure of your book and how you structured it.
So the structure of the book, which makes me really excited because there's rainbows throughout, but there's a lovely foreword by a woman named Gloria Walton, and the introduction is actually the only part that's kind of written in first person or shares a little bit about my personal experiences. So no, it's not a memoir. I really wanted to write a textbook in some ways that didn't feel like a textbook, but has hundreds of references. So it is kind of a textbook. So that was the experiment. I wanted it to be an introduction. There's about 5 chapters in a toolkit. The toolkit at the very end has more answers and questions and resources from over 30 activists from around the world. And yeah, the chapters, you kind of start out learning about intersectional theory, ecofeminism, intersectional environmentalism. Then you learn about environmental justice and how it started, who the mother and father of environmental justice is. You learn about privilege, you learn about data, and then you learn about some case studies. So it really is an introduction that I feel could exist as a supplementary text. And I've heard, although it is dense, that it is a quick read. So that makes me happy.
Oh, excellent. No, that's for sure. Okay. So Amanda has a question. Can you talk more about the connection between Afrofuturism and environmentalism? Do you have favorite Afrofuturists that have inspired you most?
Yeah, I'm curious. So we actually just posted on Intersectional Environmentalist a contributor who wrote about Afrofuturism. And I'll explain my understanding, and then Thea, let me know your thoughts. But Afrofuturism and radical imagination, as I was talking about, go hand in hand, because in a lot of Afrofuturism or even just sci-fi that's, written by Black folks, it is imagining a future in which we are liberated. So one mainstream example of Afrofuturism in media and art is the movie Black Panther and Wakanda, because Wakanda is the most technologically advanced society in the universe here, which I loved. And they're Black, and it's so beautiful, and it's infused with Afrofuturism because it's saying one day in the future we are here, and we're not being oppressed, and we're creating our own cities, and we're thriving, and we have all this amazing technology that's sustainable and regenerative. So I think Afrofuturism can give people a lot of hope. I also have the book back there, Black Futures, which I love so much. Everyone should check that out, and it kind of touches on that. But yeah, I feel like intersectional environmentalism and imagining a future that is more just for Black folks goes hand in hand. But yeah, Thea, any thoughts on this one?
I completely agree with everything you said, Leah. And I think one of the best parts about Afrofuturism is that it centers around the African identity and it doesn't divert from that. It celebrates that, puts it at the forefront. It's, in your face. And it's such a beautiful, depiction of how our culture can fluctuate through time periods. And, when you were talking, Leah, it made me think about futuristic movies and how usually when you watch them, it's very bleak and modern. It's what is minimalist?
Or
Yeah, or it's just has no flavor, no spice, nothing. It's just very bland, and it's not exciting. When I see that, I'm not really excited to wear monotone clothes all day and just walk around and be sad and boring. I definitely feel when I watched Black Panther, my eyes were open. I was so excited at all these possibilities and all this beauty and all this infusion into one place. It was so beautiful, and I think that is one of the best parts about it is it's a celebration of the Black identity instead of a rejection of it.
Fantastic. Ladies, this was an excellent conversation. It was a pleasure hosting both of you. And Thea, for anybody that's watching or sees this on YouTube after, do you have some place if somebody wants to keep track of what's going on in your world that you'd like to send people to?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram. It's at organically Thea.
I like that. And then Leah, how about you? I'm sure there's all kinds of places for people to find out info about you and your organization.
Yeah, I would say Green Girl Leah on Instagram, or that's my website, or Intersectional Environmentalist. And if you do get a book, which I hope you do, please support indie booksellers. I found out that I was an indie bestseller of March on bookshop.org because people are supporting their indies. So please support indie booksellers, get your book from them. And thank you all so much for having us.
Oh, this was fantastic. So ladies, have a wonderful rest of your evening and weekend. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.